your camera, sorry. And if you have any questions as we go, please drop those into the chat, and we can field those to Andre as we get a chance. I'm just going to introduce Andre van Vesterhuizen. I hope I pronounced that right. I've worked with Andre for years, and I hope I've pronounced the name correctly. This session is on sustaining quality learning. I won't go into the content too much because I'm sure Andre will want to introduce it. But as I say, if you've got any questions, please drop them into the chat and we'll field them to Andre as we go. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. It's good to have you guys here at the graveyard time of this afternoon. We had a wonderful week, and my colleagues gave me quite a hard time because every time that I engage with my work, I suddenly realized, you know, they have covered something that I wanted to say at a certain point. So I've been throwing around whatever I have here. But this is a session where I would like to explore your mind, maybe bring together some of the elements that we have discussed during the week. So yes, welcome and enjoy, and don't hesitate to ask any questions if you have questions. Okay. There we go. I came across this quote: "The aim of teaching is simple. It is to make student learning possible." Paul Ramsden said that, and maybe it's something that we do forget in all the interesting things that's been happening over the past few months, that we are so focused on what we do, how we do, and yes, in the back of our mind is we know the students have to learn, but we can make it much easier in the way that we think about it. And I have attended quite a few sessions over this time, and there's a message that came through all the time. And I would like to concentrate, although we say on the program 3 areas, it's 4 areas now, where we focus on proactive and better planned structure. And I'm putting that better in inverted commas. It's not that I'm saying that you're not doing it good enough. That's not the point here. Scaffolding for learning that aims at technology, enhancing quality without overload, because I think everybody has felt things has been going a bit crazy with them. And then active blended learning, evaluation rubrics. So what came to mind is we're all in a situation. We're in a different time. We're in a completely a space that we have not known before, and the place where we work from is different. And we as people sit right in the middle of that. And we have to understand the difficulties that we have as individuals at the present moment, and also as teams. Where is it taking us? How do we understand the space, the time, and the place where we are in at the present moment? And then transfer that into how we can manage ourselves better in the process. Because if we feel like that, how does our students feel at the same time? So the question that we need to ask ourselves: what is happening in my time, place, and space? What changed in my time, place, and space? And what communication or dialogue do I have, either with myself through reflection or with my colleagues, about the time and the place and the space that I'm in? But then the same question is actually valid to our students as well. What is happening in their time? Do we understand what's happening in their time and the place? And this is a question that came up quite a few times during the discussions that's been happening. Denise has talked about it. Others has talked about it in the way that they struggle to engage with their students, and also having an understanding of what is the problems that our students have. What is the space? Do they have a space to work from? Do they have an understanding of the place where they are in at the present moment? And how does their time affect them? Where do they feel as the individual? If we say people, it's actually the individual that we're talking about, is if we see them face to face or one-on-one on different stages. Then what changed for them. And we have an understanding what has changed for them, because such a lot of change for us, all the changes and things that we have to translate into the new time. And then where do we go with this? Do we talk with them? Do we have a discussion with them? Now, after yesterday's start and the external that we had that spoke about how they approached their work, it took me completely to a different place, and understanding that there's a conceptual aspect that we have to understand as we go forward. Because we had a lot of technology, we had a lot of pedagogy, we had a lot of how our students might think and feel and where they're going. But we haven't seen that as a put together. And I actually went and put this active blended learning framework together so that we can understand that that section of time, space, and place and people is like a warning sign for us in the middle. It's a warning for us to really take stock of how we see our individuals, not only the work that they do, but also the way that they go about. And if we look at the green side, that is where the university's principles are actually lying. We have decided on an active blended learning process. It's pedagogy-led. It has to do with creative innovation, but we also need to have a pragmatic practice in the way that we go about it. But if we work from the people point, from the central place and space and time, we have to have a dialogue. We have to have a discussion and an engagement. And the three areas where I would like to take you then is, how do we address the scaffolding, the task online, the assessment, the time on task, and then I have a difficulty now to see my own slides here. But anyway, I need to go back, sorry. Is how do we address those remaining elements, and how do we go about in dealing with that? Now, I'm going to touch on those aspects, and I am going to direct you in the design aspects and what my colleagues has been talking about, because if we talk about the design elements of it, Andy has talked a lot about the active blended learning, the principles, how we go forward. He's talked about the curriculum with ABC, Mike as well. The scaffolding, the team, everybody that has been involved with the different technologies, structures, Moodle, the new design for Moodle has been involved. Amy has talked a lot about assessment, time on task, and then Catherine and Denise has brought the dialogue with the students into the practice. The question then could be, now where do I fit into this process? And we have to manage our students better. This is a discussion that came from another webinar where Gina Whisker was actually part of it. And how do we capture the voices of our students? Do we have a developmental dialogue with them? And now the question is, what do we mean by a developmental dialogue? What is the understanding of a developmental dialogue? Because they are students. Do they need anything different? Yes, it's different times, it's different stages. They are sometimes just as scared or unsure as we are, because if you talk to your colleagues, they will tell you things has been so different. They feel overwhelmed. Our students feel the same. We have to have that discussion with them. We have to be focused and proactive. It's not that we haven't done it in the past, but we have done it different, and it becomes more of an element of focusing on the individual, on the person, than just necessarily on the way that they deliver their work and their studies, so that we can provide them with the support. We have to have more compassion. We have to have more understanding, because if they don't have the tools to work with, and they're overwhelmed in the place where they sit and where they have to study, or they don't have a place to study, we must be able to understand. Although the university is bringing part of in their thinking and the policies, processes and structures forward to support the students? Are we sure that it has happened with them? If I say better planned and more structured, it's not that you haven't been planned, but it's a different planning. And we have to make sure that what we do is fit for purpose. Is it fit for online? Is it fit for the task that the student is supposed to do? How did we make those choices? We have to be more rigorous than before and afterwards. In other words, in the planning, in the way that we address our students, we have to be quite sure that we ask the right questions, and also how we follow up. What are we doing afterwards? Because learning equals engagement plus experience, and our experience here counts at the present moment, because we need to provide the security and the safe space for our students to engage with. Now, how do we go about this? Listen to the students' personal stories. Have time for them. I've listened to Stuart's session where the students talked, and they feel overwhelmed. They said in that session that they get so many emails that they cannot stay ahead. They don't know which one to look at, and sometimes they've missed one, and then the time frame is past of, you know, having to engage with that. There are students who have digital poverty, and that needs to be recognized. We think because we live in a first world environment that everybody has that. No, they don't. I've been arguing there for many, many years. The fact that we just make the assumption that the students have, the old saying still is the same: never assume that your student understand, and as far as technology is concerned, never assume that they have all the digital and web-based elements that they need. Find informal and formal spaces for them in the way that you engage with them in this new world, in this new environment. Some of you have done it before. For others, it's new. They are struggling to find those formal and informal spaces for them to work. And I'm not talking here of synchronous and asynchronous. You can actually fit whatever you think needs to fall into that. But what is formal for you and what is informal, and how would your student experience that so that the learning can happen? And most of all, you know, we have to create an environment for students so that they can understand how to become better than what they ever thought they could be. How do we motivate them to learn? How do we engage and give them that security? If they're going to be fine, they're going to engage in a way that's going to make life better for them. And some of the things that we can use as part of their emotional processes they go through them is ask them to have a reflective diary, how they deal with their work, how do they go forward with their work, how do they engage with their work, what is happening with them. It can be a diary or a journal, or a way that is easier for others to engage with. And we have to understand that the only control that we have in this journey as lecturers is the intellectual journey of the individual. But what is asked from us now in a much more specific way is to care about the mental health, the mental space of our students as well. How do we bring that into the normal space and area we normally would work? Sustaining quality for learning. The learning communities. We had learning communities for quite a long time. We can start with Etienne Wenger with his communities of practice, and some people really happy, and you know, when you talk about communities of practice. But we had Etienne Wenger here quite a few years ago, and he ran 2 sessions for us. And what was quite clear out of his sessions is the misinterpretation when we talk about communities of practice. The base of communities of practice is mastering. How do I become a master of what I do? How do my students become a master? What processes do we have to have in place for them to be a master of what they engage with? And they always made it quite clear, he made it quite clear on that day that it's how do we walk the path? How do we go through the valleys and over the mountains with the students so that they can understand that mastering process? Explore the value of collaborative learning. Stuart has engaged with this quite a lot. There's other of our colleagues that has done that as well, talking about group work, talking about working together, students as partners in the same place. How do we scaffold our technology? How do we scaffold the work that we do? And I would like to have a look at Gilly Salmon's 5-stage model. Now, what is important about Gilly's 5-stage model is that yesterday, our guest speaker, he actually mentioned her that in the work that they've done in Northampton, is that she was part of that. She has quite a record of the work that she has done. And if you go to the resources, you will find the different people and different places that she engaged with and where she is on the website. So let's talk about what she is. Talk about activities, the framework, and scaffolding. The book that she has written's name is Activities. Now, the definition for this scaffolding is task online. It's a framework to learn something in a dynamic and interactive way based on intense engagement, reflective dialogue between students and lecturers in a computer-mediated environment. This is the way that it has been structured. Now, what is important here is that it's based on a 5-stage model. And this is only focusing on technology. You have to have this clear in your mind. This is technology-based engagement, access and motivation. In other words, for students, do they have action? Do they have the motivation to engage and be part of the process? How do they socialize online? What do we do to make them comfortable in the space that we provide for them? How do they engage with the information exchange and then create knowledge construction as part of their development or development of a task or development of an end product? Now, the purpose of that is, of the process of it is what is the purpose? What have we set them to do? What is the task? What is the interaction and the responses from that task? What is the outcome? And what is the product that they deal with? This is the scaffold that she has. Now, you will see at the bottom of the slide that she has 2 videos online that you can easily go and watch about this with a short discussion of how this framework works. It's how do we set the baseline, the access and the motivation. You will always see that there's 2 parts of it. It's how we set up the system and having access or provide access for them, and how welcoming and encouraging is our attitude towards the engagement that we have, the dialogue, in other words. It's not only the structure, is that what we have set up, is that fit for what the purpose would be? How welcoming and encouraging is it? Then the online socialization, how do we send the message out? How do they receive the messages? And how do they familiarize, or we familiarize them in providing the bridges between their cultural and social and learning environments? Because we have to understand that coming from different places, we have different interpretations. I've been 16 years in the UK now, being a British citizen, and I still sometimes land myself in places and spaces where I have no clue what the discussion is about. Why is it this discussion? And I can remember when I arrived here first, and it's a silly thing to share with you, but that's actually what happened to me, is when the first time that I had a landline. Where I came from, if you don't pay your landline at the end of the month, you're in real trouble. You're not going to have it. I've asked the question after the first month, where do I pay my telephone bill. And everybody think I must be nuts here. What is the problem that I have? I didn't know at that stage it's a 3-monthly period and how it works. But I was absolutely really anxious about this whole concept. Now, if me as a grown-up have that type of issues as a new person in a different country, how will our students sometimes feel as well? When they don't understand, they don't have the understanding, and they might not have the digital know-how or the products or the technology that they need. Do we have that communication with them to make sure that the socialization with them online is happening? The information exchange, in other words, the tutoring and the supporting the learning materials. How did we search for the technology and for the type of software that we need to engage with the information exchange? Is the choice that we have made the right thing for this course, for this module? Now, we have a lot of support from our TEL partners from where they're going, Mike, Tom, everybody else there who has been involved with them. Just ask. Never be afraid to ask if you don't know. Don't think that you have to sit in the dark and deal with stuff. Ask them, and they will be able to support you in any way that you need. How can we construct the knowledge for them to go forward? If we say conferencing is not just what we're doing at the present moment. Conferencing is the methodologies of choice, the VLEs of choice that we engage with them to facilitate the practicality of learning. Then the development, the ongoing work, the supporting and responding to the work that they have engaged with, providing them links outside, either in closed conferences or, having a face-to-face type online with our students to support them, directing them to where they need to go. As Denise has shown us the other day, there are a lot of links and places where we can refer our students to if they get stuck. But the fact of the matter is we have to have the scaffold. It's an e-moderating scaffolding. And the technology support and the moderating should walk side by side in the way that we work with the scaffold in going forward with that. Will you guys just have a look for me at the questions? If some of the questions came up, it's too small for me, I cannot see them.
Yep, certainly. Just had one come from Jim. There are at least 3 library staff here, and we often get very limited time with students. Do you think we should be attempting to cover all these 5 steps briefly in, say, an hour-long session, or leave that to the ongoing course and just focus on matters at hand?
I think this you should see this as a conceptual framework. In other words, it's not just one at a time. Some of them will work simultaneously. Some of it will not be at the same time. Some will be ahead of the others, and sometimes it's run through the whole program at a time. I think it is finding a structure. I was surprised yesterday. I don't know if you have been at our guest speakers session where they actually showed that they had what we have done with the kids in the primary schools and the secondary schools, a structure of a planning structure for the hour that they involved. It's something that I haven't seen for years. And if they go down to that nitty-gritty, now the question that I always ask is, when we engage with them, how much learning happens in the time that we have with them? And if some of the scaffolding will take you there so that you have made the right choices about the right material that you have to use, then it will be helpful to make sure that you have preempted what they need and you've been productive in reflecting on what is that. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, that's really good. Thank you very much.
Okay. I focused this work on specifically 2 people, Gilly Salmons and Diana Lorelot, her work as well, because there's an sort of a linkage between the two types of things, because dialogue is in both. Dialogue is continuing, ongoing, and sort of almost supersede everything else that is happening there. Sometimes we do find that not enough communication, just sending out an email is sometimes not enough. You have to have that secure space for the student to say, I know I cannot contact you every day, a time of the day or what, but that I have an access place, a system that allows me that's welcoming and encouraging for me to ask the questions that I need to ask, that I'm not afraid to ask the questions that I need. So let's go to enhancing quality and not reducing quality, because in the way that we had to make massive changes in the last few months, did we enhance quality or did we reduce quality? And I think everybody would like to say, yes, we have enhanced quality. Diana Lorient, she uses a conversational framework, and if you have never read some of her work, I would advise or suggest that make the time to go and read some of her work, because if there's somebody that has an extreme pedagogic base for the arguments that she's making, for the directions where she's going, she's one of those. She gives you a lot of the models of learning that has happened in the way that she came to the answers that she had. She's been doing this now for quite a long time, and she has arrived at those 6 steps. And if you've listened to Andy and his planning for active blended learning and the ABC, these are the same steps that come up in that process. Now, the 6 steps is learning through acquisition, learning through collaboration, learning through discussion, inquiry or investigation, or both, learning through practice and production. And if we look at the practice here, it's the same type of aspect that comes from Etienne Wenger's work as well, mastering. It's through, if you look at and listen to musicians, how many hours have they been practicing? If you look at ballet dancers and standing with their hands on the bar in front of a mirror, how many hours have they stood there? Do we allow enough time for our students to practice? In other words, the time on task, as Gibbs talks about. How much time on task do we allow them for them to get that? Did the technology that we used or engaged with supported them to have that time on task, to do the practice, and to have the end product that we have envisaged for them? And how much have we supported them in the discussion to motivate them to be self-directed, and with the collaboration with their colleagues have then acquired the information for them to have the support that they do? This on its own, the same way that Julie Salmon's work and Diana Loriot's, actually, these should be sessions on their own. I'm just touching on them. They are really in depth in the way that they go ahead, and maybe at some time it would be good for us to have a look at the different aspects individually that they make use of. Now, she makes use of a dialogue framework. Now, I was lucky to get the animation of the teacher and the individual, but not of the group. I couldn't find one there where we could show them, and I don't like them to look as if they're bored. What is happening here? This whole framework is based on a very strong pedagogy base of the work of Piaget, Vygotsky, and Kolb. Piaget on the understanding of individual learning, Vygotsky in the way that he thinks about peer learning, and then Kolb's aspect of collaborative learning. Now, I have not used her example because it's quite confusing. There's 23 different steps, and it's almost like snakes and ladders when you work through them to find from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 where they are. So I've tried to simplify it in as much as I can, because what is happening here, and it is something that we have to understand in the way that we would like to reduce the overload that we feel and engage with, is as a lecturer, I come to the students and inform them from an academic, a pedagogic understanding of the subject area or the material that I would like to share with them. My student, and in this case, let's argue that we have 30 individuals. Although we only show one individual, there's 30 individuals. Because under normal practice, we will have this discussion. The student will interpret as an individual from their own prior learning. And if I talk about prior learning, it's not what we have provided for them to learn. It is the knowledge of where they come from, their understanding, their cultural background, in how they interpret what we have said. Individually, that student can have a discussion with the lecturer. And we will see there's a second arrow that goes back to that person, feedback that arrives there. And in many cases, this is what has been happening under normal circumstances. Now, in the way that she understands how learning should take place, and this is where Vygotsky's peer learning or learning from a master actually comes in. Once I have interpreted what I have to understand, although there are only 4 people at the table, that person in the middle becomes part of that table. In other words, there will be 5 at that section. Now, this is random numbers so that I can show to you how it works. And this is a process that you can take in mind when you're busy with, give feedback, have to engage with, an overload of work. Now, what's happened here, this is individual, or the 5 individuals, when they start collaborating around a table, they bring that individual knowledge into that table. Now, let's say for argument's sake that they have to provide a collaborative wiki or a blog or an artifact with the individual knowledge that they bring to the table. Now, they will have a discussion. I will take it away as an individual, or the student as an individual, and bring back the consolidated element, and then they will present, the 5 of them, the consolidated artifact to the lecturer. Now, what has happened, because there's 5 at a table, if I have 30 students and 5 groups of 5, I have only 6 artifacts that I'm going to see. The students have already critiqued, engaged, developed some of their work. So I see not 30, but 6 artifacts to have a look at and to provide feedback on, that then go back to the student, and then they can again work on it. And what can happen now is, instead of keeping on with the 6, I can let the 2 groups, in other words, make them 10 in a group. So they work with 2 artifacts that they have been developing and consolidate through their collaboration on the 2. And eventually, as a lecturer, I only have 3 to provide final feedback on. But in the process, they have engaged with one another, and it is true, it is scientifically proven that students learn more from one another than what they learn from lecturers. So this is a format that you can keep in mind. I'm not saying it's the only format, but principles of those in the concept of how they understand, because the other element that's coming in here is systems thinking. She is using the single loop and double loop learning from Aguirre in the way, because solving a problem in a single loop, in other words, if in Kolb's learning cycles, where we go from how we create, why, how we engage, how we develop, and how we reflect on it, if we come up with a problem and we come to the end of the process, we have not addressed the problem. That is single loop learning. Double loop learning means actually that we engage with the problems that has come up and make changes to that problem so that we have a different answer to that. And that's where the circulation of feedback within the process is actually happening, so that we can find everybody. And you will see on the expressions on the faces of the individuals there that not everybody is always at the same spot, at the same place. As I said to you, I have still find after 16 years here that sometimes I don't understand. Does our students understand? We had the experience of one student that actually was really upset. We had in a session that I had where we discussed international students and international lecturers, the experiences that they have. And what happened there is that in a previous session in quality and diversity and engagement, the work that Catherine has done so engagingly with us the last few days, is that somebody made a comment about laboratory work where the students from certain areas of the world didn't engage with the materials that were provided with them. And this guy was really upset when he came into the session. And the argument that he made is, where I come from, there's only one set. I'm not allowed to touch that set. I was not aware that this set that you have in front of me is mine and that I can work with it. I was not allowed to break anything where I come from, and I'm afraid to touch. He was really upset. And sometimes we don't. We just accept that our students know that they will. Now, areas are different at the present moment. If we think about how Suzanne and her team of nurses has explained to us in the OSCEs how they went about and make changes to those type of scenarios for the students to engage, so that they have a fair opportunity to engage in assessment. It is important for us to think how this process will play out. How can I use this type of process to minimize the overload that I have? And I know that Amy had her session as well, where she used blogging as a formative assessment process. Now, is this part of such a process? Now, where does audio feedback fit into these sessions? You know, it's something that we have really to think about, and how does it play out? And maybe for us and our technology guys, because you should have figured out by now that I'm not the most techie savvy person on the planet here, is that how do we engage to find the elements that we can deal with in this process? Now, what is important here, these are books that from L'Oreal that is available. She has published in 2012 and 2001, and there's a book that has gone out now in 2019. It is a Chinese version of the, I think, teaching as a design, or one of the rethinking the university, in other words, how we use technology in it. And it's a recent publication, and that's the reason why I have the date there. What is important here is to understand that within that process that we have looked at now, this enabled a teacher-student dialogue. It also engages in a student or allows student to engage and provide self-directed learning, self-efficacy and motivation for our students, because if they see that they can perform and that, you know, they are not just forever just judged as not being able. Yes, they will make mistakes. Who doesn't make mistakes? We have provided not only the initial orientation for them, but also the orientation of direction, how to manage their time, how to manage the place, how to manage elements around them, how to reflect on the work. The part of the collaboration as a team has got reflection in it as well. And how do they self-regulate their time so that they are effective and give their fair share to the groups in the discussion that goes on. Now, the design pattern that you use is you have drafted from the information that you have been provided and way of thinking, or an material that you can put forward to others. It is shared, it is critiqued, and it's refined through extended processes of collaboration and ongoing in that. in that time frame. Now, I'm back to the original diagram that I had. And the question is why it wasn't here earlier today. And I actually thought going through the process, it's important just to come back to have a look at what is the intentions. In other words, if we think of dialogue, what areas have we now engaged with? We engaged with technology, we've engaged with assessment, we have engaged with design, and all of that includes dialogue, collaboration, talking to one another, sharing information, the assessment, the time on task, the scaffolding, the task online. What is my pragmatic practice? What is my understanding of the pedagogy-led elements that leads into the active blended learning? And how do I then provide the safe time, space, and place for my students to engage with? Now, if we think this is where it ends, it doesn't. We still have to evaluate. Everything that we have designed, we have to evaluate. And you know, how do we deal with this? And it was interesting that these two active blended learning rubrics has, especially the 2021 from the Commonwealth of Learning, has appeared because it is so new that they must have been working on it, and then COVID arose because the COVID-19 language is in that. But in that rubric, what they provide you is the 7 categories, and within that 7 categories, there's 47 quality elements, which they look at content, they look at instructional design, course structure, student support, technology and media, assessment, and quality assurance and evaluation. Now, thinking about that is, can I do that as an individual, or can I just do it as a team or as a course? It's something that you have to decide, because yes, we have measures, but do we have a specific measurement for active blended learning? And this is providing that, and it's an international collaboration to bring that to the world at this time when things have been a bit chaotic in the way that we had jumped online. And, you know, by jumping online, it's not necessarily that we have gone through the thought process, because the demands to produce was so high in the process. Then there's also the SUNY online course quality review rubric, the OSCQ. SUNY is the State University of New York, where they have the same format: course overview and information with 10 different standards in there, course technology with 5 standards, design and layout, content and activities, interaction, assessment, and feedback. And you are more than welcome to go there. The links are in the resources that you can go and have a look at that. They are free to access. There is no problem with it. And it will most probably be helpful for everybody to, you know, once you have time to reflect on the way that you go forward or what you have created up to this point, is to go and have a look at one of these rubrics and say, yes, I've met the standards. No, I'm not there yet on this one. What do I need to change? Where do I have to go with this? And the most important thing for me is to come back to the people that needs to learn, because that is the simple element that I've said in the beginning. How do we support our students to learn? What does it take to learn is the question that I would like to leave you with. There's the resources that you can have a look at. And guys, if you have any questions or anything to ask, feel free. Got dead silence here on the other side. Talk you to death.
I was just going to say thank you very much for the session, and lots to think about over the coming weeks as we prepare for the next teaching block. Thank you.
You're welcome. I think what I've tried to do here is a consolidation of everything that we have done over the week. and understanding, you know, how do we bring the different points together? Because I had various people that spoke to me and said, you know, I'm quite confident with technology, but at stages I felt overwhelmed. I'm scared. I don't know where to go with that. And it's the understanding that it's one step at a time. You cannot do everything brilliantly at the same time. Master what you have, walk the path, go through the valleys. If you have to climb the ridges, you will have to do that. But find the dialogue and the communication to share so that you are not on your own in this process.
Great stuff. Thanks very much for that, Andre. That's really good. We've shared a couple of the links in the chat as we've gone along. Do you have any other links to those resources that we could circulate?
At the present moment, I haven't put them in, and you know, if people would like to have further information, because some of the books from Lorillard is in the library, they are online, people can get access to them. They're quite expensive if you have to go and buy them. But if there are people, because Andy and myself have engaged with the Apex elements as well, and if there's people that feel that they lag a bit on the research and pedagogy elements, I do find Diane Laurillard's books quite intense. You know, I need to keep my head. I am quite an understanding of learning organizations and systems thinking, and Vygotsky and Piaget and collaborative learning and Argyris. I understand their work, but it's really difficult. But because all the chapters in her book is based on an pedagogic argument. It's not just an assumption that she makes. She's working it through the different things that people have said at different times, and then come to the conclusion what would be the best. And that's how they got to those 6 steps that we've talked about previously.
Yes. Can you put the top level Moodle courses in? Yes, we can. Yeah, that's a really good idea.
Just on it, Mike.
Have you got it? Oh, great stuff. Andy's just shared the preparing for online teaching module. So it's 6 strands to it. There's 6 modules that you can engage with. Principles of online design, active blended learning, online communities and communication, equality, diversity and inclusion. Please don't stop. I've got 4. What are the last 2? Student-centered support and online assessment and feedback. Please feel free to dip in those as you need. They take some of these presentations this week into more depth and with lots of examples. So just more resources to support you in the shift to online for TV1.
I would just like to say here is that it was really interesting over the week to see how everybody who has been involved in the team, and even the people from outside that we had, how all the different strands actually come together. Although we have discussed it, we were not necessarily part of it, the knowledge base that was in the talks and the presentations and such. And, you know, as I walked on, I knew what I was going to work with, and every time I had to take a step back and say, okay, how does this now link? How does this bring me into the discussion? What else is there that I need to think about? And consolidating all those thoughts into the one element, and then, you know, coming to that aspect for me, and it's on purpose that I created that triangle. Because for me, that is the warning sign. If we don't we can have all the other stuff, but if we don't deal with the soft skills and with the people and understand time, space, and place for them and for us, we are going to be in trouble. So thank you, guys. Feel free to contact me at any time if there's anything that you would like to ask. You're more than welcome. And thank you for your help, Mike, Andy, and the rest of the team as well.
So, yeah, thanks for the session. It was really interesting.
I'll just finish by saying, please join us for our final tea at 3 when we're going to bring all the thinking together for the end of the week and where we go next.
Great stuff.
We just do. We just do, and into the next room we go. Right, left.
Yes, and it a Star Wars dissolve.
Right. Well done, Andre. That was great. Save the best till last, but you brought it all together. I think that was strategically a great move. We planned that like that from the very beginning. What can I say?
Yeah, you gave me a really hard time.
Right, I'm going to just copy all the.
Thanks, Andre. See you at 3.
Okay, Catherine. See you. Bye.
Bye.
See you in a sec. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
I hope it made sense.